Take a slow, deep breath before you allow your mind to process these words, because what follows carries a massive, undeniable psychological weight. This specific message has survived agonizing stretches of silence, countless restless nights, and the crushing gravity of words another human being desperately wanted to deliver, but completely lacked the raw courage to vocalize. It is bypassing logic and locating you in this exact moment, because a violent, irreversible shift has occurred in the unseen architecture of your connection. Your presence at these precise coordinates is not an accident. Before we dissect the chaotic, turbulent storm this individual is currently navigating in the dark, you must anchor your spirit in one absolute truth. You were never mistaken. You were not losing your mind, and you were absolutely not fabricating a fantasy to medicate a longing. The profound magnetic resonance you felt between the two of you was entirely, verifiably real. You did not invent the intensity. The deep psychological recognition, the electric pull, the unspoken understanding, every single fragment of it was authentic. And how this dynamic ultimately collapsed was absolutely not your fault. Let that reality permanently wash away the residual self-doubt quietly eroding your peace. This person has been actively suppressing an exhausting, heavy truth for significantly longer than they possess the humility to confess. They did not simply wake up one morning and peacefully decide to sever the tie. They did not locate a hidden switch and gracefully deactivate their emotional capacity. They are absolutely not moving forward with the effortless ease they so carefully project to the external world. The clinical psychological reality of what occurred behind their carefully constructed mask is brutal. They deliberately buried feelings they possessed absolutely zero earthly idea how to safely navigate. They collided with an emotional intensity that their incredibly fragile ego was completely unequipped to process. They ultimately opted for total, deafening silence because, to their heavily wounded defense mechanisms, silence registered as significantly less lethal than risking a vulnerable mistake. But unexpressed human emotion does not simply evaporate into the ether. It does not magically dissolve with the turning of calendar pages. Instead, it ferments in the dark, isolated corridors of the unconscious mind. It grows sharper, significantly heavier, and incredibly toxic with each passing day, until the internal structural burden becomes far too massive for one psyche to shoulder alone. That is precisely the agonizing space they currently occupy. They are devoid of tranquility. A sudden, violent psychological rupture occurred within them recently. Perhaps they stumbled across a forgotten artifact of your time together. Perhaps they heard a stranger utter your exact name in a crowded room, freezing them entirely as their stomach plummeted. Or perhaps the external noise of their life simply grew quiet enough for their elaborate, heavily funded denial to finally shatter into pieces. Whatever the specific catalyst was, it jolted them completely awake. They are currently staring down a reality that absolutely paralyzes them. The genuine, verifiable terror of losing your access permanently, not hypothetically, not in some distant, abstract future. Right now, this epiphany did not land softly on their consciousness. It struck them deep in the total isolation of the night when all their cheap, superficial distractions had evaporated. It struck exactly when the surrounding stillness grew incredibly loud. They finally recognized the profound depth of the void. Nobody holds space for their complexities the way you do. Nobody grasps their core identity without demanding constant, exhausting translations. No one else has ever provided that incredibly rare frequency of profound emotional safety without simultaneously suffocating their desperate need for independence. You were a complete anomaly. You stood out as entirely different from the static noise of the world. Your intuition was flawlessly accurate when it told you to trust the energy, because the energy was undeniable. Yet, despite this realization, they remain completely paralyzed by their own historical trauma. They desperately wish they could rewind the timeline and deploy honesty when the doors were still wide open. They want to confess that they arrogantly, foolishly believed they possessed an infinite amount of time to figure this out. They severely underestimated the ultimate devastating price of their silence. Right now, they are absorbing a brutal, inescapable psychological lesson. Actively choosing to do nothing is still a deliberate, highly consequential action, and that specific inaction has cost them tremendously. They are drowning in an ocean of guilt for abandoning the dynamic when it mattered most. They feel profound shame for deliberately withholding the exact reassurance you so clearly required. Retreating into a freezing silence initially offered them a temporary, synthetic illusion of safety. Manufacturing physical distance offered a false sense of control over an emotional experience that felt far too vast to manage. But dodging reality never erases reality. It only magnifies the psychological debt. Carl Jung profoundly observed that one does not attain enlightenment by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Your person has been completely trapped in this exact unconscious cycle. Fear became their primary compass. Pride became their chosen voice. Utter silence handled all the communication. And now, those exact defensive choices have tracked them down like a relentless shadow. Meanwhile, a quiet, incredibly powerful transformation has been executing entirely within your own architecture. You have evolved. They can energetically sense this massive shift across the physical distance. Your entire energetic signature operates on a completely different frequency than it used to. Your patience has fundamentally shifted. The manner in which you respond, or actively choose not to respond, has radically altered. Even the specific way you hold your silence is different now. Where your quiet once felt like anxious, heavy waiting, it now simply radiates absolute unshakable peace. And that serenity terrifies them significantly more than any harsh, venomous words you could have ever weaponized against them. They leaned incredibly heavily on your patience. They took your quiet, consistent kindness completely for granted. They operated under the arrogant assumption that you would permanently remain stationed right there, forever understanding, infinitely forgiving, constantly willing to absorb one more disappointment. They absolutely never anticipated you reaching the threshold where you quietly, cleanly decided to finally choose yourself. Now, the cold reality of that boundary is striking their nervous system like a physical blow. You were absolutely not wrong for choosing your own survival. That act was not selfish. It was a mandatory psychological rescue mission. What they are terrified of losing is not merely your physical presence. It is the unique, irreplaceable way you made them feel completely seen in a world populated by blind eyes. It is the profound safety they bathed in but flatly refused to acknowledge. It is the home they discovered within your chest, a home they possessed absolutely no earthly idea how to maintain. They are currently agonizing over a single, haunting question that echoes louder with each passing day. Did I permanently ruin the only thing that actually mattered? That question stalks their neurology everywhere they go. It creeps in when they attempt to force themselves to sleep. It shadows them when they attempt to establish new routines. It strikes them every single time they sit across from another human being and instantly sense the glaring, unbridgeable difference. Nobody feels like you do. Nobody ever will, and their conscious mind finally knows it. You need to hear this clearly. They are not okay. They wake in the middle of the night, and the immediate sensation blanketing their chest is the agonizing weight of your absence. It is the crushing realization that they are the sole, direct reason you are no longer accessible. As they navigate their daily routine, absolutely everything triggers your memory. A specific phrase, a random location, a scent that abruptly exhumes a buried timeline. They attempt to push it down. They attempt to keep moving. But the somatic nervous system always remembers what the conscious mind so desperately tries to forget. Even when surrounded by a crowded room, they frequently feel completely, utterly isolated, because nobody else comprehends their internal mechanics the way you did. No one bypasses their walls. No one silences their internal chaos the way your mere presence accomplished effortlessly. They are finally noticing the massive inventory of everything they missed when you were close. Your immense strength, your endless patience, your rare capacity to love without demanding constant transactional proof. They see the full, devastating picture now, and it hits them in relentless, crashing waves. But here is the critical framework you must understand. Their current pain absolutely does not erase your past pain. Their present suffering does not mean you were incorrect to step away from the table. You did exactly what you had to do to survive a dynamic that was actively starving you. And you should never carry a single microscopic ounce of guilt for protecting your own light. Take a slow, deep breath. Let that unshakable truth sink directly into your bones. You were not wrong. They are constantly comparing every new interaction to the baseline you establish. Every new conversation feels remarkably empty. Every new connection feels like a cheap, plastic imitation of something that was once deeply authentic. And the original was you. They might carefully omit your name from their public vocabulary, but it reverberates in their mind like a quiet frequency that never stops transmitting. There is one specific, unguarded moment they keep returning to. It isn't grand or theatrical. Maybe it was the way you looked at them when the rest of the room faded. Maybe it was a specific sentence you delivered that made them feel truly, profoundly understood for the very first time in their adult life. That specific memory lives permanently inside their psyche. They know exactly what they abandoned. But you must fiercely guard this next reality. You absolutely do not owe them your waiting. You do not owe them your sleepless nights. You do not owe them the incredible peace you fought so violently to cultivate in the vacuum of their absence. Their sudden, panicked missing of you does not require you to pause your own timeline. You already provided more than enough. You stayed significantly longer than logic dictated. You loved vastly harder than they were equipped to receive. You are entirely justified in choosing to rest now. Your deep healing does not wait for their delayed epiphany. Your life does not hit pause simply because their defense mechanisms finally collapsed. They have tried aggressively to fill the empty space you left behind. They have utilized frantic busyness as an anesthetic. They have desperately pretended they executed the correct choice by maintaining distance. But every single distraction eventually reaches its expiration date. Every attempt to move forward simply boomerangs them right back to the exact same realization. You were the anomaly. They chose distance. They chose the absolute safety of silence. But safety is a terrible substitute for fulfillment, and they are learning the brutal difference between the two right now. Meanwhile, you have been steadily forging something incredibly powerful, a reality that belongs exclusively to you. You built it yourself through your own pain. Your person can energetically feel this sovereign shift. They sense it in the way you no longer attempt to prove your inherent worth to anyone. Anger they could have handled, theatrical drama they could have easily endured. But your absolute peace is something else entirely. It definitively proves that you have fully accepted what needed to be accepted. You stopped chasing an illusion. You stopped shrinking your soul to make them comfortable in their chronic avoidance. You stopped pouring your vital energy into a fractured cup that refused to return a single drop. You did not walk away because your heart grew cold. You walked away because you finally comprehended that genuine love should never feel like an endless, exhausting audition to prove your basic human value. You recognized that you deserved significantly more than silence, more than half answers, and infinitely more than being utilized as a backup plan. That is not giving up. That is a profound psychological awakening. That is the bravest caliber of love. Loving yourself enough to entirely stop accepting deficits. Your person feels a door permanently closing right now. Not a loud, theatrical slam, but a quiet, soft, irreversible click. And that is the specific sound that terrifies the human ego the most. They desperately want to reach out. They want to deliver an apology that is raw and true, stripped of the recycled, flimsy excuses they used in the past. But the fear of rejection keeps them entirely paralyzed. They type out vulnerable messages and delete them into the void. They rehearse intense dialogue in their head that never materializes in physical reality. But while their internal panic accelerates, your peace holds completely firm. You built a reality that does not depend on their arrival. You carried yourself through the fire entirely alone. Meanwhile, the universe has been relentlessly hammering them with signs. Your name flashes on screens. Specific songs play at impossible moments. None of these occurrences are random chance. Every sign is a cosmic nudge. Every vivid dream is a doorway being held open. But the universe will not hold the door indefinitely. The final choice rests squarely on their shoulders. They are standing right at the absolute edge of their own darkness. The internal warfare is staggering. You demanded honesty. You required a partner to show up with undeniable action, not just poetic, empty vocabulary. They failed that mandate, so you chose your own life. The sudden onset of their panic does not dictate your healing trajectory. Their profound, crushing regret does not author your next chapter. The massive fortress they erected to keep you at bay is beginning to fracture from the inside out. The sheer volume of suppressed emotion has absolutely nowhere left to escape. Authentic love is a force of nature. It fundamentally disrespects artificial boundaries. It seeps into every microscopic fissure until the dam inevitably bursts. Your person is teetering right on the precipice of that exact breaking point. When that spillover finally occurs, it may arrive as an erratic message in the dead of night, or a trembling call where the raw truth bleeds entirely through their tone. But when that moment arrives, remember your absolute sovereign power. You do not owe anyone a response that you are not fully aligned with providing. Your emotional sanctuary is highly restricted territory. Nobody is permitted to barter your hard-earned peace to relieve their own guilt. You are magnificently whole. If this deep dive into the psychology of unresolved attachment gave you the clarity you have been seeking, I want you to go down to the comments right now and tell me, what was the exact moment you finally decided to stop waiting and choose your own peace? Anchor that defining moment below. Then, please click the video appearing right here on your screen. It breaks down the exact psychological tools you need to protect your energy during this shift. Stay grounded, honor your worth, and keep moving forward.